In colonial Mali, there were two sets of rules. If you were French, you lived in a separate world of comfort and privilege, exempt from the crushing taxes you imposed on others. You were the master of your new homeland. But if you were Malian, you were forced to pay for your own subjugation with backbreaking labor and taxes designed to keep you poor. This is the story of that brutal system. The French invasion of Mali didn't end on the battlefield. For the Malian people, it had just begun. Every road, every building, every luxury for the French colonists was paid for by the people they had just conquered. The weapon wasn't just the rifle, it was the tax book. We'll show you how France's rule in Mali was a masterclass in exploitation, where the local population was taxed into poverty to fund their own occupation. How are you, friends? I am Czar. Welcome to episode 7 of the French conquest in Mali. Earlier, we discussed Algeria, Tunis, Morocco, and Senegal. Origin of Malian people. Mali is situated in West Africa. It is a landlocked country, meaning it does not have direct access to the sea. Its borders are shared with several other countries, including Algeria to the north, Niger to the east, Burkina Faso and Ivory Coast to the south, Guinea to the southwest, and Senegal and Mauritania to the west. The country's territory extends from the Sahara Desert in the north through the Sahel region to the Sudanian savanna in the south. Malian people originate from the Mandan region of West Africa. The Mali Empire, Manding Mandé, or Mandan Duguba, Arabic Mali, Romanized version Mal-Ra, was an empire in West Africa from c. 1226 to 1610, where the Mali Empire began in the 13th century. Their ancestry traces back to the Mandi peoples, who established communities in the Mandan area during the decline of the earlier Ghana Empire. The Mali Empire's foundation by Sundiata Keita in the 13th century consolidated these Mandinka communities into a powerful federation, solidifying the cultural and political identity of the Malian people. France's presence in Mali, a tale of two occupations. The reasons for France's occupation of Mali are complex and must be understood in two distinctly different historical contexts: the colonial expansion of the 19th century and the military intervention of the 21st century. While both involved a French presence on Malian soil, their motivations and international justifications were worlds apart. The first French occupation was part of the broader European scramble for Africa in the late 19th century. Driven by a mix of economic ambition, geopolitical rivalry, and ideological justification, France forcefully colonized the territory, which it named French Sudan. The primary reasons for this colonial conquest were economic exploitation. France, like other industrial powers, sought to secure new markets for its goods and gain control over valuable raw materials. In the Sahel, this included resources like gum arabic, groundnuts, and later, cotton, which was cultivated through large-scale irrigation projects. The colonies were seen as a source of wealth and economic advantage. Political and strategic rivalry. National prestige was intrinsically linked to the size of a nation's empire. France was in intense competition with other European powers, particularly Great Britain, to claim as much territory as possible. Controlling the vast Sahel region and key trade routes, such as the Niger River, was a major strategic goal to project power and block rivals. A powerful ideological driver was the mission Civilisatris, or civilizing mission. This was the belief, rooted in a sense of racial and cultural superiority, that France had a duty to bring republican values, Christianity, and civilization to the supposedly backward peoples of Africa. This served as a moral justification for what was fundamentally a military and economic conquest. The conquest was often led by French military commanders on the ground who saw expansion as an opportunity for personal glory and promotion, sometimes acting with significant autonomy from Paris. Gustave Bourgneuf de Borde, who captured Bamako in 1883, and Louis Archinard, whose operations led to the conquest of the Tukulor Empire in the 1890s. Other commanders like Fastin Boitou, Eugène Bonnier, Joseph Joffre were also involved, notably in the conquest of Timbuktu in 1894. Life in Mali under French rule. from the late 19th century to independence in 1960, was characterized by economic exploitation, forced labor, land dispossession, and harsh, centralized administration. The colonial power known as French Sudan prioritized resource extraction, forcing Malian farmers into cash crop production like cotton, which often yielded meager profits and disrupted existing economic and social structures. Resistance to French control was met with severe suppression, including the destruction of villages during uprisings. Before colonization by the French, communities enjoyed codified rights under vast and powerful empires. After Mali fell to French colonial rule in 1892, the French declared all unproductive lands to be under the control of the state, under the pretense of increasing productivity. Communities were dispossessed of their land. State ownership continued in post-colonial Mali, fueling conflict over communities' customary claims. During French colonization of Mali, the French army relied heavily on the tirailleurs sénégalais, which were colonial troops recruited from French West Africa. These African soldiers were the backbone of the French military effort in the region, playing a crucial role in maintaining French control and expanding its colonial presence throughout the early and mid-20th century. The tirailleurs sénégalais were part of a larger system of colonial military institutions used by France across its empire, deployed to places like North Africa, Indochina, and Madagascar. During the establishment and enforcement of its colonial rule in Mali, then known as French Sudan, the French army committed a range of crimes that left a deep and lasting scar on the region. From the initial conquest in the late 19th century until independence in 1960, the actions of the French military were characterized by systemic violence, brutal subjugation, and the widespread abuse of the local population. These were not isolated incidents, but rather integral to the logic of colonial expansion and control. One of the most notorious examples of the era's brutality was the Voulet-Chanoine mission of 1898 to 1899. A military expedition originally intended to conquer the Chad Basin descended into a rampage of horrific violence across the Sahel, including modern-day Mali. Led by Captains Paul Voulet and Julien Chanoine, the column became infamous for its massacres of entire villages, the widespread use of rape as a weapon of war, and the summary execution of anyone who resisted. Porter carriers were shot when they became too exhausted to continue. The mission's trail of destruction became a scandal, even in Paris, symbolizing the unchecked power and depravity that characterized many of the pacification campaigns. Executions of community leaders and suspected rebels were common practice, intended to terrorize the population into submission. The colonial state demanded labor for its large-scale infrastructure projects, such as the construction of railways and roads. This was not voluntary employment, but a system of forced labor, travail forcé, which was often compared to slavery. Villagers were conscripted by military patrols and forced to work in brutal, often deadly conditions for little to no pay. Refusal or escape was met with severe punishment. The imposition of colonial rule was accompanied by the systematic pillaging of local resources. Furthermore, the French colonial administration imposed heavy taxes on people and property, payable only in French currency. The collection of these taxes was enforced by the military, which often resorted to violence, confiscation of property, and the taking of hostages to ensure payment from impoverished communities. Daily life was often marked by casual brutality, humiliation, and the denial of basic justice. Legal proceedings, when they occurred, were heavily biased, and the testimony of a Malian held little weight against that of a European. These acts were not merely the excesses of a few rogue officers, but were part of a broader system of colonial domination designed to break existing social structures and exploit the human and natural resources of Mali for the benefit of the French Empire. While the Catholic Church largely failed to de-Islamize the Malian people, it played a significant role in the ideological and cultural degradation of them during the colonial era. The Church's impact was complex, characterized by a notable failure in one objective and a damaging success in another. The attempt to convert Malians away from Islam was overwhelmingly unsuccessful for two main reasons: a deep-rooted Islamic faith in a cautious colonial policy. It meant the French colonial administration was officially secular and often anti-clerical. More importantly, they were pragmatic. They knew that aggressive attempts to convert Muslims would provoke widespread resistance, jihad, and rebellion, making the colony impossible to govern. To maintain stability, they often restricted missionary activity among Muslim populations and chose to govern through established Muslim leaders. Yes, while the Catholic Church largely failed to de-Islamize the Malian people, it played a significant role in the ideological and cultural degradation of them during the colonial era. The Church's impact was complex, characterized by a notable failure in one objective and a damaging success in another: the failure to de-Islamize. The attempt to convert Malians away from Islam was overwhelmingly unsuccessful for two main reasons: deep-rooted Islamic faith. By the time the French arrived, Islam had been the dominant religious and cultural force in the region for centuries, deeply embedded in the societal structure, legal systems, and identity of the majority of the population. There was no spiritual vacuum to fill. Cautious colonial policy. The French colonial administration was officially secular and often anti-clerical. Because of this, Catholic missionaries like the White Fathers had very little success and often shifted their focus to the non-Muslim Dogon and other minority groups, implicitly admitting their inability to penetrate the Islamic heartland. The Church's primary crime was its role as a key agent of the mission Civilisatrix, civilizing mission. This entire project was built on the racist premise that European culture and the Christian religion were superior, and that African societies, including their Islamic traditions, were backward, pagan, and in need of salvation. The Church couldn't break the faith of the Malian people, but it was a powerful tool in the colonial effort to break their spirit and delegitimize their culture. Mali's journey to independence from France began with the rise of post-World War II nationalist movements and culminated in the peaceful but politically charged dissolution of a short-lived federation with Senegal in 1960. The most influential of these was the Sudanese Union African Democratic Rally, USRDA, led by the charismatic socialist leader Modibo Keïta. Keïta and the USRDA initially campaigned not for outright independence, but for a more equitable association with France, envisioning a federal union where African territories would be equal partners with the metropole. Modibo Keïta's ambition was to build a powerful, unified West African state. In early 1959, the Sudanese Republic joined with its western neighbor Senegal to form the Mali Federation. This new entity negotiated directly with France for total sovereignty. On June 20, 1960, France formally recognized the independence of the Mali Federation. For 2 months, it existed as a single, independent country. France has never paid direct monetary compensation or reparations to Mali for the economic exploitation and crimes committed during the colonial era. Neither asked for apology. Mali's independence from France was achieved politically and peacefully, so there was no war of independence and consequently no deaths associated with such a conflict. While this system has been recently reformed for West African nations, its legacy is one of a continued financial obligation from Africa to France, not the other way around. Therefore, the historical financial relationship has been the subject of claims of exploitation, not compensation, and no African nation had any monetary sovereignty about their resources or currency. The first crisis hit just 2 months after independence. Mali was born from the sudden collapse of the Mali Federation with Senegal in August 1960. This left the new Republic of Mali politically isolated, landlocked, and cut off from Senegal's crucial port of Dakar, which crippled its trade. Domestically, the first president, Modibo Keïta, and his USRDA party aimed to build a powerful, centralized socialist state. To achieve this, all political opposition was suppressed, leading to a one-party state by 1964. This authoritarian turn alienated many and created deep political resentment. This was most acutely felt in the north. In 1962, the first Tuareg rebellion broke out. The Tuareg people, with a long history of autonomy, resisted being integrated into the new, southern-dominated state. Keita's government responded with brutal military force, poisoning wells and destroying livestock, which crushed the rebellion but created a legacy of extreme bitterness and set the stage for decades of cyclical conflict. Driven by a desire for complete sovereignty, one of Keita's boldest moves was also his most disastrous. In 1962, Mali left the French-backed CFA franc currency zone and created its own Malian franc. The new currency was non-convertible and rapidly lost its value, leading to soaring inflation. This economic shock devastated the country by wiping out savings and crippling commerce, causing severe shortages of imported goods and encouraging widespread smuggling and a black market. The devastating Sahel drought, which began in the late 1960s and intensified into the early 1970s, caused a catastrophic famine. This environmental disaster decimated Mali's agricultural and pastoral economy, which was the livelihood of over 90% of its population. The government's inability to manage the crisis exposed its weakness and sealed its fate. These interlocking crises, political repression, economic failure, and environmental catastrophe, made the government deeply unpopular. In 1968, a military coup led by a young officer named Moussa Traoré overthrew Modibo Keita, ending Mali's first chapter of independence and ushering in over 2 decades of military rule. France has built infrastructure and health facilities, but for their own benefit and looting of resources. The last French soldier from Operation Barkhane officially left Mali on August 15, 2022. The pain and sorrows of the Malian nation are countless. In today's modern world, most African nations are still dependent on others in regards to technology and defense. Still, the nations have not learned that corruption is a plague for society. By mixing up religion and politics and mismanagement, those nations, despite having raw, expensive resources, are led to poverty and dependency. Here we conclude episode 7. Thanks for watching. If you like the content or have learned anything new about Mali and French rule in the colonial era, then your subscription, liking, commenting, and sharing should be my reward. See you in another next episode of the French invasion in another country. Take care of yourself and have a good time.